let us start with the fiscal statement being delayed. There was a real need not that long ago to steady the markets, which was why it was brought forward from November to the 31st of October. Why then are we seeing this delay?
Well, I think because the Chancellor and the Prime Minister, quite rightly, you've got a new cabinet, new Secretaries of State, getting familiar with their departments, felt that having an autumn statement on the 17th of November will give everyone around the table a bit more time to be able to look carefully. There's not going to be any easy decisions, I can tell you, because I've been there myself, been Secretary of State for Education. Of course, I was Chancellor for a short period of time over the summer, and then as Chancellor of the Duchy of Lancaster, the Cabinet Office, the sort of the operations side of government. But what the Prime Minister wanted to do is make sure that we, circle back and look at everything closely. The important thing to remember is, as he said yesterday, he'll always be on the side, and he mentioned pensioners, of those most vulnerable in our society. He was the Chancellor that delivered the £1,200 additional help for the 8 million most vulnerable households. So we'll look at all of that in the round, and the Chancellor, Jeremy Hunt, will then make that autumn statement on the 17th of November.
But this is undoubtedly going to be a Prime Minister who is going to have to deliver significant cuts to public spending, isn't he?
He said that yesterday. There's not going to be any easy decisions. You have to step back a second and think where we are today. We have war on our continent. This is a major war. We haven't seen anything like it since the Second World War. Putin is using energy as a weapon. Not just, we saw when I was in the Treasury, where gas prices were spiking so suddenly that many businesses, viable businesses, were worried about being put out of business. The energy intervention we made has made a difference. But actually he's using it, if you look at what's happening with food costs, because energy then reflects into food prices. So the Chancellor and the Prime Minister are determined that we send a very clear message to the markets that we are financially responsible.
Completely.
And we have an energy plan to deliver that energy security for this country in the medium term.
And all of us understand the necessity to reassure the markets. That's because of what Liz Truss and Kwasi Kwarteng did. And look, I understand that you are not the Chancellor. You are not in a position to kind of perhaps be specific on the intimate detail of what is going to be announced on the 17th of November. But the triple lock on pensions, I mean, your colleague Maria Caulfield puts it like this. When the government doesn't confirm one way or another, speculation mounts, vacuums are created, people start to worry. I've got pensioners who are worried. Can you tell us this morning what will be happening with the triple lock?
So I think it would be unwise of me to preempt the autumn statement. This government is about responsibility and sustainability. What I would say to pensioners watching this morning is both the Prime Minister and the Chancellor are very much aware, and I'm going to state the obvious here, is pensioners are uniquely unable to work to and add to their income or improve their income.
Inflation. That suggests it should be tied to inflation rather than wages. So again, if you're not in a position to answer that question, we can move on.
It's irresponsible to preempt an autumn statement. With an autumn statement, governments wait until the Chancellor's done the work to be able to make those announcements in the appropriate and proper way.
We are expecting Shell, massive petrochem giant, to announce its profits in the next few minutes, and it's expected they will run into the multiple billions. 60 billion was an estimate I saw this morning somewhere. At a time like this, when such difficult decisions, as you've just conceded, there will have to be cuts to public services made. Isn't now the time to look again at the windfall tax, expanding its scope, making it broader and using some of that money to plug the hole that we all know exists, in part because of what Kwasi Kwarteng and Liz Truss did?
So I'm glad you mentioned the windfall tax, because there is already a windfall tax on the energy producers. And of course, that's producing about £5 billion of additional income into the Treasury. And of course, we went further because what Kwasi did, quite rightly, was look at those who generate energy, who were not changing anything in their model, renewables and nuclear, but whose price was pegged to gas price. So we were paying a much higher price for energy.
Giving money, it's 9.5 billion. Don't you think we could maybe take some of that off Shell and use it to pay nurses a bit more money? I mean, those are the calculations that you have to make. Look, if you can't commit to expending the windfall tax, I know that's a job for the Chancellor, but just personally, don't you think there's an argument for it?
Well, as I said, we already have a windfall tax. The important thing, actually, is to make sure those companies are investing in gas assets in the North Sea. This year, we've seen a 26% increase in our gas output. That's a good thing, because we're less reliant on Putin's gas.
You just banned fracking.
We have to... Well, no, hold on a second. We have to make sure that those companies will be incentivised to invest. So what Rishi's done in the past, if you remember, is incentivise, for example, the BT and others to invest in
if
broadband.
The question of whether or not it's going
by
to be
using
extended,
the tax system.
We are going to move on. But just finally on all of this, before we move on to the kind of the internal problems in the Conservative Party, James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, of course, was sitting where you were yesterday, and we got onto the issue of Qatar and the World Cup that is taking place there. I just want to get your views. His words yesterday were to football fans, particularly to gay football fans, to be respectful of the host nation, to show a little bit of flex and compromise. I mean, was the Foreign Secretary telling people to dial down the gay if they want to go to the World Cup?
No, he wasn't.
Well,
absolutely not. So what he was saying is the policies of the government of Qatar are not our policies, nor would we condone them. And in fact, we use our relationship to make sure that every opportunity we get to share our values, to share how we behave in this country with countries like Qatar and others. But they have their own culture and ways and have come to where they are at from a different journey.
Is it any surprise that there aren't more out gay footballers when FIFA awards the World Cup to Qatar?
Well, look, the World Cup is in Qatar. I think it's important, as I said, to always, at every opportunity, and I was, till very recently, responsible for equalities in this country, to make the point that these values are universal, they're important values, and other countries need to go on a journey as well.
Should any future World Cup be held in a country where gay people cannot walk down the street holding hands, for goodness sake?
Look, as I said, the policies of countries like Qatar are not our policies, nor do we condone them. And I think that's the message I want to send to anybody watching this programme today.
Let's talk about the Home Secretary, and we have to spend a bit of time on this. We heard from Jake Berry yesterday. He characterised the situation as multiple breaches of the ministerial code. Is that accurate?
So the Prime Minister has looked at this. The Home Secretary herself, if you recall, in her letter, said, I made a mistake. I'm not going to deny that or shirk away from it. I will resign. She resigned, quite rightly. The new Prime Minister dealt with this yesterday, looked at it, and he felt that she, and as I would feel, she is allowed a second chance.
So there were multiple breaches of the ministerial code then? So the use of the personal email address, the leaking of sensitive government information, sending it to the wrong email address, I mean, that in and of itself are multiple breaches. But again, we will ask the same questions that were asked in the House of Commons yesterday. Did officials raise concerns about Suella Braverman? Did the Cabinet Secretary warn against her reappointment?
So officials raise concerns and raise points with Secretary of State, with ministers all the time, and I think they should be allowed to do that. And having discussions on air about what officials advise ministers, I think would be unhealthy for the way we run our country, because they have to feel free they can do that without being quoted
she is
publicly.
The Home Secretary. There is a security dimension here. I mean, does she have full security clearance?
The Home Secretary has full security clearance, of course. But what I'm really trying to say to you is she didn't, try and hide away or try and brush this under the carpet.
Report it. Despite the fact that Rishi Sunak claimed that yesterday in the House of Commons, it wasn't the Home Secretary who reported her behaviour. It was identified, and she got sacked for it.
She admitted her mistake.
She resigned.
She resigned, and she apologised. And actually, people, in my view, I hope you agree with me, are allowed a second chance.
Yes, I understand the opportunity for redemption, but when you're the Home Secretary dealing with sensitive security documents, I'd say that possibly you need to spend a bit more time in the wilderness than 6 days after you get sacked for a security breach. I mean, it's been dressed up as if this is some kind of technical breach. Let's examine exactly what she did. She leaked immigration policy and data to a fellow traveller in terms of migration policy using a private email address. I mean, that isn't just a breach of the ministerial code. That is her undermining the government for whom she served.
Well, as I said, she admitted her mistake. She resigned. A new Prime Minister came in, looked at the information and decided that he wants to give her a second chance. I think that's the right decision. It's the right thing. You just said redemption is a good thing. Politics now, it has been compressed in terms of timelines because of the change we've just had. So if it happened a month from now or 2 months from now...
Does this government take people for fools? It is clear that she was only reappointed because Rishi Sunak needed to reach out to the right of the party. I mean, it's not as if Suella Braverman is the intellectual powerhouse of the Conservative movement.
Well, you're now personalising and being very rude about a particular politician. I think Suella is very capable. It's unfair for you to say that. So I would just ask you to reflect on that point.
I'm asking why
she
there
is
was no
incredibly
one fit
capable
to fill the post of Home Secretary, other than the person who got sacked from it 6 days ago. I mean, don't you understand that there is a degree of frustration that people have, that there is this kind of wash, rinse, repeat cycle in government at the moment, that someone messes up royally, they apologise, and then they act as if the apology somehow makes everything, peachy again.
No, wait a second. You said apologise. She resigned. She didn't just apologise, keep me on. She resigned and apologised, and a new Prime Minister came in and looked at the information and decided to give her a second chance.
This isn't the first time we've been here. Gavin Williamson, now back in Cabinet. Priti Patel, sacked from international development, back into the Home Office. Chris Pincher. You could equally argue, Boris Johnson got sacked by the party a handful of weeks ago, and at the weekend you were campaigning for him.
Let me tell you why. Because I called him Boris Johnson 2.0. I didn't want to see or give the perception to the country or to our membership that we are somehow conspiring to keep the man who delivered a mandate for all of us, because we all own that mandate, being kept off the ballot. It had to come from him. Now, I'm going to say something to you. If there was Boris 1.0, he would have probably kept going because he had the numbers. Boris 2.0 decided to put country and party ahead of self-interest and step aside and support Rishi Sunak. I'm very proud of that. That's a good thing. We've come together as a party, as a family, around that table. Look around that cabinet table as a cabinet of all the talents. That's a good thing, and it should be celebrated. And you may disagree with me, but I think people are allowed a second chance, and I think the Prime Minister did the right thing to give Suella that second chance.
I will note again, though, that you concede that there were probably multiple breaches of the ministerial code, and indeed that probably officials advised against her reappointment as Home Secretary. But there is a revolving door policy going on in government at the moment, particularly in senior posts. Here's a question, and you and I, we have spoken an awful lot over the past few years, particularly when you were Vaccines Minister. I've always appreciated your candour during some of those interviews. Can you tell me how many jobs you have had in government since 2019?
Yes, I can. Because I'm very proud. So I've been the business secretary, business minister. I never made business secretary. Vaccine minister, and I'm very proud of what we delivered on vaccines. I was Secretary of State for Education, where we did skills, schools, families, and I know the Secretary of State for Education will continue that journey on skills.
9 jobs. You've had 9 jobs in government since 2019. Now, some of those were held concurrently,
yes.
I will concede.
Yes.
But at the same time, doesn't that demonstrate why this government has a real problem getting to grips with problems as they arise, plotting policy that lasts longer than 3 weeks, let alone 3 years? Someone like you, who has been through 9 ministerial jobs, Gavin Williamson back in government, Suella Braverman, this is not a government that looks as if it is performing, surely.
So you mentioned Gavin Williamson, and I think, I've said this on Sky actually some time back, Gavin Williamson did more to drive the skills agenda, T-levels, where new and incredibly exciting runways for young people to get a career, to get onto that career ladder. He did a tremendous job on skills. So I think keep attacking people. He's been out of government in the wilderness. I tell you where I'm going to agree with you. You're right, we've had instability. We've made mistakes. Rishi Sunak said, I'm going to correct those mistakes. You're going to see from Sunak a person who is reflective, who's on top of the detail, who's about sustainability of the economy, and having a plan to deliver for this country when we have war on our continent.
Well, we will see how long that lasts. Mr. Zahawi, it is always great to have you in the studio, so I do appreciate your time. Thank you.